In the late 1950s, Harold Pinter exploded onto the stage as a powerful and original voice. With plays like The Birthday Party, The Caretaker and The Homecoming, he put anger, ambiguity and menace at the core of his dramatic endeavours. They've become classics of British theatre and garnered him work as a writer, director and actor all over the world.
Stop doing that! Why do you do that all the time?
He says he sat with a blank page and waited for an image or a character to appear. He had no real idea what would happen. This is an impulse that's guided him throughout his career, from poetry and through the more overtly political dramas such as One for the Road.
Do you love death? Not necessarily your own. Others. The death of others.
And like the great dramatist Beckett, the silences are as important as the dialogue. As a screenwriter, he has a long and powerful credit list, including The Servant, Betrayal from his own stage play, and The French Lieutenant's Women.
I did it so that I should never be the same again, so that I should be seen for the outcast I am.
He recently indicated that 29 plays was enough, and he was abandoning the dramatic form for his first love, poetry. After recovering from cancer, only to contract a rare skin disease, Pinter was, last year at the age of 75, awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. Harold Pinter, you've not been short of awards during your career, but what did it mean to you to win the Nobel Prize?
At first, my reaction was a great, great surprise. And I was rather... I couldn't take it in, really. But when I started to think about it, and I was asked to make a speech in Stockholm, which I couldn't do because I was in hospital, so I made a speech. I did write a speech, and I made it on Channel 4. I took the opportunity, realizing that I was on a world platform, to say precisely what I thought about things.
You called it art, truth and politics. I mean, do you feel that as a writer you have a responsibility, no matter how oblique the political references are in your plays, to be more politically explicit, as it were, as a campaigner?
My plays have always dealt with political matters, really. You say obliquely, well, perhaps, but they always dealt with power, and the powerful and the powerless. But the longer I live, the more I feel that I have an obligation to be very, very precise and concrete about the way power is manifested and, in this world, and the way hypocrisy is manifested, really. So I think it's an obligation on me as a citizen to be very, very clear about what I actually think. I think, by the way, that it's an obligation on everybody.
You just had a particular platform, but you must be the first Nobel laureate to have offered your services as a speechwriter to the American president.
Yes. I do think the American president and our Prime Minister of this country, are gangsters. God is good. God is great. God is good. My God is good. Bin Laden's God is bad. His is a bad God. Saddam's God was bad, except he didn't have one. He was a barbarian. We are not barbarians. We don't chop people's heads off. We believe in freedom. So does God. I am not a barbarian. I am the democratically elected leader of a freedom-loving democracy. We are a compassionate society. We give compassionate electrocution and compassionate lethal injection. We are a great nation. I am not a dictator. He is. I am not a barbarian. He is. And he is. They all are. I possess moral moral authority. You see this fist? This is my moral authority. And don't you forget it.
Your views on America are very precise, in as much as there is no light and shade there. America to you is just the kind of personification of the evil empire.
That's not quite true. In fact, it's by no means true. Allow me to correct that. I'm actually talking about principally the American government, clearly, the administration, and also, of course, millions of people in America who are as ignorant as the American administration is and support the American administration. But there's a growing opposition to what is happening. And the Americans, I get quite a lot of information from the United States, and the Americans are using a term that I've always been very, very hesitant about using myself, because it's too easily used, perhaps. But they are using it, and they're calling it fascism. Mm-hmm. They're calling their own government a fascist government. And they are desperate. So, as I say, there are many Americans.
Politics has been this strong undertow, this strong undercurrent for most of your life, since perhaps your first political act in 1948, which was to be a conscientious objector. And in a sense, that set you apart.
Oh yes, it was a very, it was actually very difficult for my family to cope with the fact that their Jewish son was prepared to go to prison rather than join the army. This was, I remind, after the war, 1948, and I could see, I was 18, and I could see that the Cold War was beginning, and I realized that it was a very perilous time, and I simply refused to subscribe to it. I didn't, in fact, go to prison. I had a very civilized magistrate twice who fined my father because I had no money, and nor had he.
Had you been older, had you been called up during the war, would you have fought?
Yes, I certainly would. I was 15 when the war ended in 1945, but if I had been 18, I would certainly have felt an obligation to join the army. Yeah.
But isn't there a contradiction here? I mean, that you would have fought against fascism, but you felt no need to fight against what eventually was a very corrosive ideology for the Eastern European states, which was communism.
Well, fascism was evidently, and by 1948 we knew all about what had happened in Europe. We knew about the camps and the horror of it all. But at the time, even earlier, it was evident that Hitler was a monster, and that this war was, as it were, inevitable. Otherwise, civilization would really go down the drain.
We've been talking about the use of language when it comes to politics, but you said so often below the spoken word is a thing known and unspoken. Has that been your guide?
I think that, yes, that we so often use language to disguise what we actually, what our actions are. So language, indeed, has become, I do believe, corrupt.
Why did the chicken cross the road?
He wanted to.
He doesn't know.
Why did the chicken cross the road?
He wanted.
Why did the chicken cross the road?
He wanted
He
to.
doesn't know. He doesn't know which came first.
Which came first?
Chicken, egg, which came first? Which came first?
Which came first? Which came first?
Take the birthday party. Language there is very much a weapon. Language is a weapon of menace.
We do use language as weapons also, but we use language, politicians use language like terms, like terminology, like, as you well know, freedom and democracy and liberty, when they actually mean death and destruction. we are going to kill you for your own good.
Just give me the glass.
No.
I'll take it then.
If you take the glass, I'll take you.
How about me taking the glass without you taking me?
Why don't I just take you?
In the language in the plays, though, as well as conveying this sense of violence and this unease, and it's a kind of destabilizing force language in your plays, yet in the most everyday settings. And I wondered if you think there is menace in people's everyday relationships.
Well, sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. As we all know, there's a great deal of violence in this society, and certainly in many family relationships.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I have written plays about, like The Homecoming, which contains very violent hostilities and antagonisms, and a kind of Philistine force, you know. I tell you what I actually think. Do you want to know what I actually think?
I really want to know what you actually think.
I actually think that life is beautiful, but the world is hell. Mm-hmm. I think the world is, as it were, hell on earth, if you like. But the bloom of life itself is extraordinary. Mm-hmm. There's a wonderful poem by Milosz, you know, which talks of children, actually. How is it that children born, I can't remember it exactly, you know, with teddy bears and someone just finding life rather, they cry and they don't, and they, et cetera, they don't find it all terribly comfortable. But they nevertheless are extraordinarily interested in things and as it were optimistic. And how is it that those children, Milosz asks, become monsters when they are grown up? You know? And that's a terrible question, and it's a question there's simply no answer to it.
But that as it were, statement that life is beautiful is not something that would emanate, obviously, from your plays.
I believe it to be the case myself in my life. Mind you, it doesn't mean that life isn't extremely difficult, and always has been. But I believe, nevertheless, there is a unique, but there's nothing like your life.
No.
You can't compare it with anything else. There's something which is very, very moving about the fact of being alive. Look, I'm aware of this myself personally, because I've nearly died twice in the last 4 years. And I know what it's like to be nearly dead. I didn't like the idea at all, actually.
It seems that on one hand you have this, you know, life is beautiful, and yet one thinks of Harold Pinter as being not so much an angry young man, but an angry kind of middle-aged man and so forth, and that to the outside world, partly because of your politics, I suppose, that you're living a life of kind of sustained anger. But is that actually not what it's like at all?
I don't live a life of sustained anger. I have my very, very happy moments. I'm very, very happily married. I have been with my wife for nearly 30 years, over 30 years. And so I'm not in a state of anger all the time, by any means, actually. But I do see what we call civilization. I can only put it, not very precisely, I'm afraid, but as a betrayal of the spirit and the dignity of the essence of life, the flame of life.
Just to deal with the illness for a moment. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but it seems that actually you found that poetry was a very good medium with which you could express your illnesses. For example, your poem Cancer Cells.
Yes.
You know, they've forgotten how to die and so extend their killing life. And I and my tumour dearly fight. Let's hope a double death is out. I mean, a lot of black humour in here, but was that sort of how you dealt with very dark times?
Well, there's a lot of black humour in that poem, I think. I mean, you've got to see the funny side of things, particularly when you're confronting death. Last year, I suddenly found myself in hospital, unable to breathe, or finding it extremely difficult to breathe. And that was a really appalling time. It was very, very difficult to deal with, but I felt the spirit kept me going.
Human spirit, clearly not any kind of religious spirit at all, because you're not religious.
No, not at all. Not at all religious.
But did you find that your spirit was stronger than you thought it would be? I mean, did you?
Yes, I did. I don't know how I got through that particular episode, actually. But there was no alternative. Either you got through it, or you succumbed to a life without breath, which is not possible.
But now you have got through it. Do you feel reinvigorated?
I feel pretty good. I'm nearly 76. My legs are not what they were. I used to play a lot of tennis. I used to be very athletic, actually. That's no longer the case. But apart from that,
Apart from that.
I feel pretty good.
Also, you talk about your wife Antonia Fraser, but it seems in a number of poems you do talk about her. To my wife, I was dead, and now I live. You took my hand. I blindly died. You took my hand. I mean, do people owe debts to each other when they're in a relationship, do you think?
Well, certainly, I wouldn't be here if she hadn't been there. No question about that. It was her presence and her conviction and her devotion which got me through all these things, really, when it comes down to it.
So what gives you pleasure now? For example, do you have books that you read and reread? Are you embarking on different things?
Well, yes, I'm quite active, really. I read a lot, of course I do.
So what do you read? What gives Harold Pinter pleasure?
God almighty, that question has left me. I never stop reading. I've read a wonderful book recently called Suite Française by Irene Nemirovsky, who actually ended up in Auschwitz. A quite remarkable piece of work. Very, very powerful and very, very moving. Big novel.
You've also said that when you can't write, you feel banished from yourself. So how have you coped in times in your life when you haven't been able to write? Has it been dreadful?
Well, I know I remember I said that some time ago, but
was it a bit dramatic?
it was a bit dramatic. I actually feel much more at ease now about not writing. I'm not too bothered about it at all. I don't yearn to write anymore. I do write, as you know, an occasional poem, and I wrote the Nobel speech and so on. That's writing. But I no longer write any plays, and I don't think there are any more plays in me, actually.
Do you not? So you don't sit down with this blank sheet in front of you and wait for an image or a character or a memory to come into your head?
No, I don't.
But that's how you did it for so long, isn't it?
I've always written any play, whether it's dealing with political issues or not, or memory or love or betrayal, in fact, or whatever. They really have their own life, and I have a great deal of relish in that life.
Yeah.
That's what does it for me. I'm a very instinctive writer, and that's what happens.
You said it's a strange moment, the moment of creating characters who up to that moment, repeating the moment, have had no existence.
That's right. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
It really is exciting. I follow the clues they give me, and also the very exciting thing about the whole damn thing is that you can't dictate to them, really. I find I cannot dictate to my characters. I have to let them go ahead.
Is it a different process when you're writing a poem?
I don't think it is, no. I have been writing poetry. Well, that's the first thing I ever wrote when I was about 12, I think. I started to write poetry. So I've been writing it for a very, very long time. And it's a form of expression that has always meant a great deal to me. When you asked me earlier what I was reading, I always read a great deal of poetry.
Who do you read?
Well, I read anything, Yeats, Eliot, you know. I'm very traditional, really, in my reading. It's something which engenders in me, it really stimulates my mind. And sometimes my heart beats faster reading Yeats, for example, or Webster, or John Donne.
You were talking about your heart beating faster. Do you still get a charge out of performing? Because, of course, first and foremost, you were an actor.
Oh, acting, you mean? Yes. Certainly. It's a great charge. Acting is a very precarious and testing activity. And one does get a charge from it, yes.
So tell me a bit about your new role at the Royal Court.
This is going to be very, very challenging indeed, because I'm doing Krapp's Last Tape, which, as you might know, is a monologue. I knew Beckett quite well for some years.
Would you have accepted the offer to perform had it not been Beckett, do you think?
Oh. Well, it would have had to have been a bloody good offer, I have to say, if it wasn't Beckett. Beckett is... there's no one like Beckett.
Was he a hero?
Oh, yes. I first came across a piece of writing of Beckett in about 1950 in a little magazine called Irish Writing. And I remember that my eyes nearly, what do they say, came out of my head or whatever it is. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was an extract from one of his novels. But I can't think of anything quite so demanding and so singular as this Krapp's Last Tape.
Why does it appeal so much?
Well, it's very droll. And it's also about loneliness, finally. Loss of touch with anyone, really. It's a man who's lost touch with his life, but still, he's still in a sense amused by what's happened to him. You know, it's an extraordinary piece of work.
In the end, the final words in the play are about the years past, and he says, I wouldn't want them back. With the fire in me now, I wouldn't want them back. Do these words resonate for you?
That's what's called irony, I think. I'm in a quite another context. I have not only do I have a wife, but I have 6 stepchildren, and we have 16 grandchildren. So I can't be said to be alone, and I certainly don't feel alone. But I certainly understand what it is to be alone. I mean, I have the highest regard for Beckett. I must tell you, quite interestingly, I once wrote a play and I sent it to him, as I always did. He sent me his too, by the way.
Did you give each other notes?
Well, comments. And he wrote back to me and said he liked it very much. But he said, just look at speech 6 on page 5. That's all he said. So I looked at speech 6 on page 5 and thought, well, what's wrong with speech 6 on page 5? Why am I looking at it? And we went into rehearsal, And I went
What
in-
play was this, sorry?
It's called Silence, actually. And Peter Hall was directing it. And I went away for a week or so, and I came back and called Peter Hall and said, how are rehearsals going? And he said, great, very, very well. We have one worrying problem. I said, I know what it is. It's speech 6 on page 5. He said, how did you know? I said, because Beckett saw it.
But you've always been very dismissive when people have talked about languages and silences and situations as being Pinteresque. But will you finally acknowledge there is such a thing as a Pinteresque moment?
No, I've no idea what it means. Never have. I really don't.
So the same would go for Kafkaesque or Chekhovian or...
Oh no, I can detect where a thing is Kafkaesque or Chekhovian, but I can't look at my own plays and decide what is Pinteresque. I have to tell you, I once had a production of The Birthday Party in Paris some years ago. I realized during the course of the play that they'd made a number of cuts in the text. Nothing I could do about it. The play was going on. So I said to the director afterwards, you've made cuts, made 3 or 4 big cuts. Why did you do that? And he said, Monsieur Pinter, the thing is, you see, you are so imitated in France and in Europe that it's sometimes they imitate you, and your play, sometimes it appears you are imitating yourself. I said, will you restore that text, please? And they did.
Okay, do you recognize other people can recognize in your plays things that are particularly of your hand, your pen?
Well, it seems to be the case, I have to admit. That does seem to be the case. I recognize that. But I can't define it myself. I can't define what it is that they're actually recognizing. You use the term menace and so on. Well, I think I have no explanation of any of that, really. What I write is what I write.
Is there anything you regret? I mean, is it possible to say you regret neither finishing, perhaps, nor concerning yourself with at a particular time?
Well, not really, I think, not really. I have thrown a number of things into the dustbin over the years, that I've started to write, and they just didn't work. In no way, including poems, which mean a great deal to me. But I have very few regrets.
Very few regrets, but do you have any regrets?
I don't have any regrets about my work. My work exists, and it's been a very fruitful time. I've actually written about 20 screenplays, 17 of which, this I happen to know, were actually filmed with no change in the script at all, which I think is pretty unusual, actually. So I'm quite proud of that, and my career in films. And I couldn't have had a more enjoyable life in the theatre. I love working with actors, always have. And I've also directed about 20 plays, as far as I can recall. So I've enjoyed all that very, very much.
You have, of course, written a new piece. This is 2 people on a mobile phone.
Yeah.
What was the image that sparked apart from that?
With 2 images. One is the fact that I detest mobile phones. I think they're a real excrescence, and a disease, a plague. Second, and I don't have one, by the way. Secondly, I find there's a thing in life where people continually say to another person, how are you? I'm very well, how are you? And I find it really tedious.
Because it's what they're not saying.
Well, precisely.
Very Pinteresque.
It's not Pinterest. It's common.
Banal.
You know, yes, it's banal. And it never stops. So my piece, apart from that, is really very light, I think. But I do believe, nevertheless, that it's a way of avoiding any conceivable issue by simply dealing in banal cliches. And I find it pretty tiresome myself.
It may be one small piece, but it would suggest that Harold Pinter is still writing.
Well, that is true. I might write something tomorrow, who knows?
Harold Pinter, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Newsnight Review will be back next Friday at 11 o'clock, and Jeremy will be here with Newsnight on Monday. For more details and useful links for both programmes, visit bbc.co.uk/Newsnight Review. Until then, from Gavin and me and all the team, have a good weekend. We leave you with Harold Pinter and Rupert Graves reading Apart From That. Good night.
How are you?
Very well. And you? Are you well?
I'm terribly well. How about you?
Really well. I'm really well.
I'm so glad.
Apart from, oh, you know.
I know.
Apart from, oh, you know.
I do know. But apart from that...
How about you?
Oh, you know, all things considered.
I know. But apart from that.
Sorry, I've lost you.
What do you mean?
I lost you.
No, you didn't. I'm right here, where I was.
Anyway, where were we?
Sorry?
I mean, apart from all that, how are you, really?
Terribly well.
Well, you certainly sound well.
I am. Apart from, oh, you know.
Yes, I know.
But you're well, anyway.
I'm wonderfully well, to be honest.
I'm really glad.
Apart from, you know.
But apart from that.
What?
Apart from that. How are you really? Apart from that.